Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm James Hull. I lead the Aptitude team, and with me today is Debbie Schuhart and Brian Grossman. Would y'all like to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. My name is Brian Grossman. Excited to be here. I lead our enterprise supplier strategy and more specifically our supplier performance team.
Hi, I'm Debbie Schuhart. I lead our physician preference and clinical preference team. This is a team that works with organizations to help them improve their performance across cost and quality.
So let's jump into some questions. So first one, challenges that we've all seen this year, whether it's provider or supplier facing. Can y'all kind of give me some ideas of the challenges that each of you are seeing? Debbie, we'll start with you first from the provider side.
So what we're hearing from providers and what we're seeing is a lot of margin pressure. Some organizations that have traditionally had significant margins are seeing those cut to zero or even negative, and those that have struggled to make margin are really not able to even come to a even keel at this point. Those margin pressures are related to a lot to inflation, as well as ability to staff and continue to hold on to staff. Higher salaries are driving some of what's going on, as well as the need to supplement with travelers. So there's a big issue in the industry really in terms of staffing. In addition, I've really seen a significant focus on supply assurance and a lot of concern around making sure that they have the right supplies at the right time for their patients. And so there's a lot of work going on with us and inside organizations to ensure that they have the right supplies.
Thank you, Debbie. Brian, what are the obstacles the suppliers are seeing?
Yeah, so there's a multitude. Maybe I'll highlight two. The first one I'd start with is really this concept of access. So I kind of reflect on my career before I was at Vizient. I was a clinical sales rep selling spinal implants and biologics, and typically the individual that was making the buying decision was the physician, right? So I would go in, I'd talk about my product, talk about our organization's ability to service our customer. And typically that individual was able to say yes or no, right, and make that decision. Fast forward to today, we live in a very different world that involves a much more complex decision-making process, right? And I think for suppliers, it's one thing to talk about just getting to the right persona, but it's another thing to understand how healthcare organizations are making decisions, right? And so I think about some key personas, whether it's in value analysis, service line leads, individuals in the C-suite, whether it's the chief medical officer, the chief financial officer. I think given that complexity, I think for suppliers to, one, be able to navigate it, to understand, but also just to get to their customer, to that right persona. And Debbie, to kind of reflect on all the challenges that you listed, I think on top of that, our providers are consumed with a lot of daily challenges that makes it even more difficult to really get that mind share. So that's a really big challenge. It's an important one, I think, for the industry to tackle. The second one I'd mention is probably, and I've seen a lot more progression on this front, but this real desire to get out of what I'd call a transactional relationship, right? That's typically housed inside a contracting event. And I think what we see a lot in the industry is provider and supplier do a lot of work to negotiate those agreements. And typically what happens is those stakeholders then fly away from that event. And I think, that's a challenge for suppliers to really, get engage with their health systems to really play a bigger role in that value equation and start to really get involved in the implementation and the optimization of those agreements. And I think the good news is we're seeing a lot of progression there, but I still think it's a challenge that the industry is trying to tackle relative to moving from a transactional to more of a strategic relationship that really is focused on a broader value proposition.
Thank you both for highlighting some of the challenges that both suppliers and providers are facing. So now as we look at what is Vizient doing to help drive innovation or try to look at how do we tackle these challenges, Brian, would you like to talk about what we're doing for the supplier side?
I know we've talked about this in years past during this event, but it's been a really exciting journey for Vizient, right? And it goes back almost 3 years now, right, where we really made an intentional strategic pivot to evolve from a GPO to a healthcare performance improvement company. And that, that's allowed us to, re-engineer our orientation to providers relative to driving a more comprehensive value proposition and really infusing our broad set of data and analytics and technology in our resources to really start to work with healthcare organizations around maximizing their cost, quality, and market performance. And I think it's moved us from more episodic relationships with providers to being more of a sustainable healthcare performance improvement company. I think that that work is, one, very gratifying, but two, I do think it's opened the door for how we now can engage with suppliers very differently, because absent that strategic pivot, I think to this day we'd still be stuck in more of a transactional relationship with suppliers. But our providers need more. They need more from Vizient, and they need more from our suppliers relative to how they can support their pursuit of optimizing cost, quality, and market performance. And maybe the last thing I would say is I do feel really good about how we've evolved in the market to be more of a convener, right, between healthcare providers and suppliers to really, I think, help evolve and mature this greater exchange of value. And I think that's an exciting place that we sit in the market today.
Thanks, Brian. Very insightful. Debbie, what are you seeing on the provider side?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are involved when we start talking about providers in order to help them really overcome those challenges. Some of it's really about data and the access to actionable, reliable, and regular data. And through the Aptitude platform and some others, we're able to help organizations really bridge that gap. That information is really key when they're working with their physicians in order to help align around strategies and conversations to help move an initiative or a project or a strategy forward. And then to Brian's point and some of what Brian mentioned, I think working with providers to help move them from where they are in a more tactical type relationship where it's really all about the contracting event to a place where they're interested in something that's a little bit more strategic and exploring more innovative options, whether that's technology, whether that's process, whether that's really just a relationship and how to drive more value. And what we're trying to do is really help evaluate where providers are and then meet them where they are and help them move on to the next level as it is right for them.
Thank you both for the insights that you gave as far as the challenges and the opportunities that we have to help solve for this. As we go forward through the meeting, you'll see how we're working with providers and suppliers differently to help address these challenges, to try to solve for what was talked about here, as well as show some of the innovation that we have been working on.